Out of this when you come and watch these guys who haven't worked together? It looks like it's pretty choppy out there. What do you learn, really?
Yeah, you know what? It gets better though every day. It's just like when we start in May and June, it gets better. The timing and these guys, this is their first day where coaches have taught them all new stuff, all new concepts, and as you said, they're working with new players. But it does get better each day, and again, you see how guys deal with adversity, which is important. And here, it's not just about what we see on the field. It's also the time that we get to interview them and spend some one-on-one time with them.
That's as important as the combine interviews, right? Because this is saving you time at the combine, right?
Definitely. Yeah, this allows us a chance to talk to guys, obviously seniors for the most part, which allows us to focus more, on the underclassmen. There'll still be some seniors that aren't here, but it definitely allows us to check some boxes and knock some guys off.
Is it unlimited number of interviews here?
It is. It's the combine is more because their time is so slotted. It's very regimented. Here it's more loose and you got more time. It's not even the 15-minute. If you want 12 with this guy and 25 with this guy, you can do it.
So it's a given that the underclassmen represent generally every year the higher-rated guys in a draft class. But you've gotten a lot out of this particular out of the Senior Bowl. The question is, do you look at this any particularly different than any other year, that this is mostly where guys who are going to fall into that second A category or whatever are here more so than the guys you're going to evaluate later?
Yeah, I mean, there's good players out here. There really are, and all up and down. And again, sometimes guys don't get drafted high. They weren't used a certain way in college, or maybe they were injured or they've transferred. Things just didn't mesh, but we see it every year, guys that don't get drafted or guys that are drafted late that come in and say, man, how did this guy fall? And so it's our job here to make sure we comb through every player here and make sure we know them the best we can, and it's part of the process. It's not the final straw or anything like that, but we'll go back and watch these practices even up into April before the draft. If we're trying to say, hey, this tackle versus this tackle, they played in two different conferences, they never face the same competition, how do they fare against the same guy here for a week or so?
We had Jim Nagy on WGR the other day, and he said one thing he tries to tell the kids is you're always being evaluated. Even when you walk into a hotel or somebody's contacting you, that people are watching you. Can you kind of just talk about that aspect of just kind of getting a feel for these kids, not even necessarily speaking to them?
Yeah, it's always an interview, and you always try to tell your own kids that. But we have scouts that are tracking these guys and kind of runners trying to get a hold of them. How do they treat those people? Was a guy a pain in the butt to get over to our interview, or did he not show, or did he not return? Was he not responsive in text? All the things that we're gonna, if it's showing up now, it's probably going to show up if you draft them.
Brandon, with where you guys are in terms of the roster construction and its maturity, does the valuation that you put on guys here change ever so slightly? Because, your roster is more mature, there's fewer spots to fill, arguably. Does it change the valuation of prospects at all?
I don't know. I mean, we just like to really leave here and check off some guys that we got unanswered questions on, because it's a huge list from our December meetings. It's been pared down now that we know which underclassmen are coming out, as of this past week, and so we're really, this kind of puts a bow on some of the seniors for now, where we can really now focus our efforts on all these underclassmen that are coming out. And then again, but we'll circle back, as I was telling Vic earlier, we'll circle back to these guys, and we don't care. We want to know, we want to hit that fourth-round pick just as much as we want to hit that first-round pick. There's value throughout the draft, and you've even seen it. We've got guys still playing that were undrafted.
I guess what I meant was, like, maybe if there's a guy that might be more NFL ready sooner in his career, does your value on a player like that maybe change because your team is more advanced, you're a playoff team now? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe you put more value on an NFL-ready guy that can help you right away and push you that much further sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you do take that in consideration, and maybe it's by the position. Do you have leadership to grow a guy, or do you need, as you said, a guy ready to come off the bus, come off the draft room, and us sign him then? But again, right now we're trying to evaluate these guys any way we can and decide, is this a draftable player, is it a not draftable player, is it a fit for whatever scheme we're running?
So it seemed like, I know every year there are postseason whatever you call them, cleanup surgeries. But it seemed like an inordinate amount, or at least that's how it maybe felt timeline with the 3 guys who had those operations a couple days in a row. Can you walk through why that occurred? And it seemed like there were instances where at least John Feliciano said he was playing a whole year with a torn rotator cuff or whatever, or that was reported. What can you enlighten us on that?
I think, Vic, like anything, guys play through things all over the league. If you look across the league, this is now the teams that are out of it. You go get second opinions. Our doctors, after the season, we'll take X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, whatever needs to be done, and then a lot of times their agents will have them go to get a second opinion somewhere and see if we can agree on what needs to be done. And sometimes it's elective. It may be that a player says, or the doctor says, hey, you can do it, and it'll help you. You can get it cleaned up and you're done with it, or you can brace it and continue to play the way you did in season. So sometimes it's elective on the player, but we also, for certain players, do recommend, they get whatever procedure done to clean it up.
Is there any concern on any of those guys that they won't be ready? Well, probably not for OTAs, but training camp, is that an issue with anybody?
No, I think, right now, we never try to put too big of timelines on it, Sal, but some of these guys will be in those red jerseys in the spring, when you see them in May. But the way we have it, planned now, as long as nobody has a setback, everybody that I'm aware of would be at camp ready to roll, again, barring a setback or anything like that.
Again, Brandon, with where your roster is and having 9 draft choices, how do you kind of weigh that? Your roster was a hard roster to make last year, and some people out on the outside say, are 9 draft choices going to make this roster? How do you weigh all that in terms of what you're hoping to come out of the draft with?
Yeah, you do. That's a good question. I remember, in Carolina, as our roster got better towards some of those better years we had, it was, are we going to spend the 6th-round pick on a guy that's really going to make our roster? And so you do weigh that, and part of that will be, as we get through this process in March and April, how deep is the draft? How deep is it truly? But some of that will come down to medical as well. There will be guys that we have good grades on that we would like to take, and our medical guys have major concerns on them. So you do want to see how deep the draft is before you decide, how far you can probably go before you're drafting guys that you're going, man, this guy's probably just going to be a practice squad guy at best.
Because there is a better way to kind of utilize your resources if that proves to be the case, right? Like
yeah.
Whether you're moving picks or whether you're doing anything, right?
Yeah, you ideally don't want to just draft a guy that day you draft him and looking at your depth chart that there's no way, barring injury, that this guy's making it. But you do want to add depth, and to your point, maybe we use a later asset for a future pick or to trade up in this year's draft.
Trey, Dion, and Matt, they just ended their 3rd year. You can now start to think about renegotiating with them, or extending them, I should say, excuse me. Is there any thought of doing that this offseason with any of those 3 guys? Have you started any of those processes?
Yeah, we're, we don't really get into contract negotiations, but it is nice that, we've been saying all along we want to draft, develop, and sign, that, that clock is finally started, and we'll see. There's not a rush or anything like that with those guys, and we're still kind of going through our process of who our free agents are first that could potentially be walking out the door before we decide that. But we'll see. We'd love to have those guys.
The Sam linebacker, he retired, your Sam linebacker. Just how do you view that? Is it maybe even more of a niche position than the will, because there's more will linebackers playing in college football, in a sense, given the size of players?
Yeah, losing Lorenzo, obviously for his leadership is one thing, but the position's another. And his unique skill set was we brought him up and he rushed. And so there's not a lot of guys that can play off the ball and are still good rushers as well. So I think he kind of had a unique role for us. We'll basically grade the players and decide what fits, what we're doing. But nothing. We're still grading them as
right.
Will's, Mike's, and Sam's like we always would.
Right, but okay. So do you think, is it harder? He's got to be. You can't not be able to cover in the NFL,
yeah.
and yet you don't want to play 3 will linebackers.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. It is a matchup game, so we do want guys, similar to Matt and Tremaine that can match up. But there are certain situations, and we have different packages too with the Buffalo nickel and other packages that we use. So honestly, if he's a good football player, we'll find a way to get him on the field.
With respect to re-signing your own, as you mentioned, Brandon, are they all on different timetables? Do you kind of group them all together and then see, which one materializes first? How does that all kind of come together, one by one, or every case is different? Or?
As far as the drafted guys?
Or the guys you want to re-sign, the UFAs, yeah.
Yeah, well, some of these guys we've had preliminary discussions with their agents, and like I mentioned at the end of season press conference, some of these guys, I know they're going to want to see what their market is. That they've earned the right to go to free agency, and if we come up with something that they feel, doing their research is of their market value or greater, then I'm sure they would sign it beforehand. Otherwise, it happens a lot. It doesn't mean if they go all the way to March and we haven't got them signed that we won't get it done. Sometimes guys truly have to get a feel for what their market is before they want to make a decision if they're going to stay.
And with that in mind, how does that impact your budgeting in terms of where you're putting your money, quite literally?
Yeah, it's like anything. It's like I said before, we have to set a value, just like we do with the UFAs that we'll sign from other teams, is we got to put a value, and if they go outside of that value that we put on them, then we have to be willing to let them walk and understand now we've got to find a replacement for them.
Brandon, if you do end up picking an edge rusher in this draft, what is going to be the quality? Because it's going to be a rookie, not a free agent who's going to be a veteran guy coming in. What's going to be the quality you're going to need to see to get an edge rusher in the draft and have him be an immediate contributor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. You can never have enough pass rushers. So we'll compare him to the guys that we have and how quick, how smart is he, what's his skill set. And at the end of the day, there's guys in this draft that I'm already aware of that could come right in and play for us now. Those guys usually go pretty quick, though. So I don't know how long they'll last in the draft versus what's in free agency. I mean, it's a premium position, and that's why you see, the big APYs when these guys sign on, and there's some free agents that are coming up, too, that we'll have to weigh versus the ones that we have that are UFAs.
Brandon, what can you tell us about your new D-line coach, Eric Washington?
Eric, really excited to have Eric on staff. Due to Carolina's transition and Coach Rivera, he became available. This is what I'll say about Eric. He's one of the best D-line coaches I've been around, and he will bring a toughness, an edge, big-time leader. I think when you guys meet Eric, you'll be very impressed with him. Obviously, he's done well. If you look at Carolina's D-line since he came in 2011, he's a good man, good family guy. He fits what Sean and I are trying to do, and I think he's going to be a big asset for Coach Frazier.
One more on the same question regarding the edge rusher at receiver, which is supposedly a deeper position in this draft. And does this particular game also offer some, based on what you could see, some value at that position?
Yeah, there are some guys out here. The list a couple weeks ago was even better, but a couple of guys had to bow out due to injury. But this was a pretty good list of guys to look at. So this will be a good week. We haven't been able to. We met with some guys last night, but none of them were receivers. Hopefully tonight, I think we have a few slated. But yeah, there's definitely some guys here that could come in and help us play. And then, there's a decent amount of underclassmen that came out too. So, right now it looks, to this point, like there'll be some options for us, like it's a pretty deep position.
The kid from Arizona State, Ayuk, I think?
Yeah.
I think he's hurt, right? He's not practicing?
Correct.
What do you know about him? He played for Herb, which is probably a good thing, a pro coach like that.
Yeah.
And he's a return guy, too. What have you thought of him so far?
Yeah, I mean,
know it's early, but
yeah. Without getting into it, I watched his tape. He did some really nice things. Have not been able to meet him. I know our scouts have done their background work on him. I don't really want to give that away or anything, but was looking forward to watching him down here. Unfortunately, to your point, he's not going to be able to participate, but he'll be a guy that we're going to spend some time with in the process and look forward to meeting him. He'll definitely play on Sundays.